Kentucky Derby. Kentucky Derby.
Now they move around the turns. The leader, War Admiral, 2.5 for free.
Next it is in the center of the racetrack. Seattle Street drawing alongside again.
War Emblem is still there. War Emblem is pulling away. He's got another gear. Yeah, that's West State come in the Derby. Wheel away takes command. Lion Heart is all heart. Smarty Jones is all out. And here is the first undefeated winner of the Kentucky Derby since Seattle's low of 1976.
The Kentucky Oaks is 1 week away. The draw for the Derby and the Oaks is Monday. Opening night at Churchill Downs is tomorrow. We are getting closer and closer to the greatest and biggest horse race of the year. Welcome to the Morning Workout Show presented by TwinSpires. We are in Louisville, Kentucky at Churchill Downs, where we had rain last night and into this morning. Temperatures are on the rise, mid-50s, but the main track for today's workout session currently rated as sloppy. As we take a look at the headlines for today, and we had a couple of important Kentucky Derby workouts yesterday. 2 fills and Race Kane both posted Thursday breezes. And both of these horses saddled by first-time Kentucky Derby trainers Larry Ravelli and Ben Colebrook. 10 potential Oaks horses worked yesterday, including the likely favorite Wet Paint. Third in the Santa Anita Derby, last out, Skinner draws into the field. Juan Hernandez has been named to ride. Jose Ortiz will work undefeated Louisiana Derby winner Kings Barnes tomorrow, Saturday. Todd Pletcher has yet to name any rider as the official jock for Kings Barnes, but Jose would seem to have the inside track. Joe Christopher and Scott Shapiro joining you. And Scott, I mentioned 1 week before the Kentucky Oaks, and just makes sense that we would bring on Rosie Napravnik, who's been joining us here on the show the last couple of years, 2-time winner of the Kentucky Oaks, and she's got a lot of fillies to look back at from yesterday.
She sure does. It was a busy day. Good to have you back. Thanks to Travis Stone, who filled in for you admirably, of course. But we got to take a look at some of the works. We'll get to take a look back. But really looking forward not only to having Rosie back in general, but to hearing what she has to say about some of those Oaks runners.
You know it, these couple of weeks are really a blur. I forgot I wasn't even here yesterday. So, yes, thanks to Travis. Much appreciated. We'll send it to the third member of our team, Caitlin Free on the backstretch. And Caitlin, I mentioned we got some rain last night into this morning. Better last night and today than next weekend.
You got that right. I hope Mother Nature gets it out of her system early on. Track's actually going to be really nice for opening night tomorrow. It's sloppy right now. It's got a chance to dry out as the day goes on. I think it's going to be really nice with a little bit of moisture in it for opening night, but obviously still going to be fast. Excited to take a look back at some of those Oaks works and kind of really break them down. There were so many of them going on yesterday. We didn't have a chance to really kind of view all of them in their entirety, so definitely wanting to look forward to breaking those down. And they had a couple of those Derby works that you guys mentioned. I spoke to Gerardo Corrales, who was on board Race Kane at Keeneland for his work. No rider has officially been named, but I know he's pretty high up on the list, and he seemed to get along with the horse really well. He said the work was smooth and that the two get on pretty well, so he's really excited. It would be his first Kentucky Derby mount should he get on board. And we also have a new face on the backstretch, Mandarin Hero, the third member of the Japanese team. He's also eligible on the list, but he is here. I've been informed that he's sleeping in this morning, but we'll probably be able to get a chance to look at him on track tomorrow. His friends are out there right now, Derma Sotogake and Continue R. But before we get too deep into the show, high above the finish line, let's go ahead and welcome in the fourth member of our team, Rosie Napravnik, 2-time Kentucky Oaks winning jockey, and there's nobody better that's going to be able to break down these Oaks workers. And good morning, Rosie, and I'm kind of jealous of that view you got.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, I was in your spot last year, which I really enjoyed, but this is quite a grand view of the track here. And I'm excited to be in this spot this year. Hearing the sloppy track this morning, you can really hear as the horses splash through. But it looks like all the rain for at least the next couple of days is out of here. So we'll have some good days of breezes with hopefully a fast track after the weather shapes up the track this afternoon.
Well, thanks, Caitlin and Rosie. And I got to sleep in yesterday. Mandarin Hero gets to sleep in this morning. I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to see him in the shoot with his friends
Jet lag.
tomorrow. Rosie Napravnik, two-time Kentucky Oaks winning jockey. Believe You Can and Untappable. She's ridden in the Kentucky Derby 3 times. Great to have her on. And then Brandon Stauble's going to join us this weekend to break down some of the workers. Should be a really busy day tomorrow for the Derby horse.
Yeah, today pretty mellow with the thought of rain and the rain actually coming. Tomorrow going to be pretty chaotic as we get tomorrow. We'll be 1 week away from the Run for the Roses, Joe. Hard to believe.
Tomorrow opening night at Churchill Downs as well. So lots to look forward to this weekend. Derby top 20. We had one change. We'll talk about that on page number 2, Scott, but the top 10 remains the same.
3 Pletchers in the top 8. There you see 2 Phils who worked yesterday at Hawthorne sitting in that 5 spot. Ray's Kane working at Keeneland in the number 9 spot. As we turn to the next page and we do see the appearance of Skinner now in that 19 spot. Of course, Continuar at 20 because he won the road to the Japan Kentucky Derby. But Skinner, 3rd place effort in the Santa Anita Derby, should be running on late. It does say Victor Espinoza. He has been the regular rider. But as you mentioned in the headlines, Joe, it will be Juan Hernandez this time around.
All right, that was reported by John Sheriff yesterday. As we take a look at the outside looking in, a Cyclone Mischief for Dale Romans is number 21, and that was lucky last year. I know Dale would rather just draw into the field and not be an AE. Dale Romans, no stranger to the Triple Crown races. He's participated in the Derby several times. He's hit the board in 10 Triple Crown races, in fact, and won the 2011 Preakness with fan favorite Shackelford.
Without question, in my opinion, Cyclone Mischief, amongst the best 23-year-olds in the land, did not deserve to get in because he didn't earn the points. But if he does get in, he will be involved early. We've seen crazier shots by far hit the board in the Derby.
Yeah, that's a really good-looking animal, and Elbaugh Family Stables has done well with Dale Romans in the past, and they have Angel of Empire involved in this year's Kentucky Derby as well. Jason Luch, the managing partner, will be joining us on the show next week. Looking forward to that. Cyclone Mischief has made a nice impression in his track work in the mornings here at Churchill Downs. Cyclone Mischief, like you said, we'll be talking a little bit later. If he gets into the race, he'll be a pace factor here.
Yeah, he's got 2 straight 3rd place finishes to Forte in the Florida races. The Fountain of Youth and Florida Derby ran well in both of those efforts. Would likely be prominent. Has hit the board in one of his 2 starts here in Louisville.
So we have former rider Rosie Napravnik joining us on the show today. And we have a current jockey, one of the favorites here at Churchill Downs, Brian Hernandez Jr., who's had plenty of experience in the Oaks and the Kentucky Derby, and he's nice enough to be standing by with Caitlin Free on the backstretch. Caitlin?
Yes, I am joined here on the backstretch by jockey Brian Hernandez Jr. Going to be the first rider we've interviewed this week leading up to the Derby and the Oaks, and you've got mounts in both of those races, so happy lead up to the Derby, and thanks for joining us this morning, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be the first one on.
Absolutely. So you're going to be on Sun Thunder for the Kentucky Derby for trainer Kenny McPeak. You had a chance to work him a couple of days ago. This was his first time that he's been working with blinkers. He's worn him a little bit more in the mornings. He's never worn him in a race, and you've had a chance to ride him a couple of times. So just kind of take me through that work and what you thought of it with the blinkers on.
Yeah, he went well. You know, he's a big, long horse, so he's kind of gets in his rhythm. And with the blinkers, it seemed to make him kind of focus and go forward a little more. And you really noticed it when he turned on the backside the other day. He switched leads at the 3/4 pole here, and he got really, really aggressive and just kind of wanting to get forward and get to doing things. And then from there, he went the half and smooth 12s the whole way and then galloped out well.
I was really impressed with the way he looked, and you could definitely tell that it kind of woke him up a little bit. His ears were pricked, and he looked a lot better, but he's kind of got that late closing style, and that doesn't always work throwing the blinkers on those types of horses. So what do you think about him wearing them in a 20-horse field in a unique race like the Derby? What do you think it could really shake up for him?
Maybe it'll just make him go forward a little more, and, you know, his running style, he's just going to need a little pace and just kind of get a good smooth trip more than anything. Unfortunately, in the Louisiana Derby, that didn't work out for us because we got bunched up around the second turn, and he wasn't able to kind of get in his nice routine like he needed to do. So hopefully here with the Derby, it looks like there'll be a little more speed, and we're hoping that going into the second turn, things kind of spread out for him, and we're able to just kind of give him a good trip from there.
You had a masterful ride on Defining Purpose in the Grade 1 Ashland at Keeneland a few weeks back to get into the Kentucky Oaks, and she took a really big step forward in that race. Did her performance really surprise you at all in there?
No, not really. You know, the night before I was sitting there talking with my wife, and she had been watching her races down in Oaklawn all winter long, and she kept telling me what a good filly she was, and Kenny had a lot of confidence in her as well. So going into the going into the Ashland there that day, we just kind of thought that if we gave her a good trip and got away from there in good order, that she could show up with that kind of race, and she went ahead and proved it for us.
So what you're telling me is we need your wife to come on here and help us handicap.
Yeah, she did a pretty good job that day.
So further stepping up now into the Kentucky Oaks, she's got a good race foundation underneath of her. She's already beat a very nice field and some of the horses already in the Oaks. Do you see her further taking a step forward in that step up and trip here in the Oaks?
Yeah, definitely. You know, she's a lightly raced filly, and this time of the year you tend to see 3-year-old fillies jump forward with big numbers, and it looks like she's kind of on that trend.
All right, thank you, Brian, and happy you could join us, and good luck in the next week, and hopefully you got a big shot in you for both those races.
Thank you. Y'all enjoy Derby.
All right, thank you so much. Brian Hernandez Jr. joining us on the backside, and he's got some big shots coming up in both the Derby and the Oaks in a week's time.
Well, thanks, Caitlin. Brian Hernandez Jr. having ridden in the Derby 3 previous times. And as far as some disappointments, he actually lost his Derby mounts the last minute in both 2020 and 2021 when Art Collector and King Fury had to back out with minor issues. As we take a look at the crowd starting to gather here, open to the public. We got the Dawn at the Downs coming up on Sunday and Monday here at Churchill Downs. So glad to see the fans enjoying themselves here this morning. And so far, so good when it comes to the weather. Raise Kane earlier this morning. Caitlin Free alluded to the fact that does not have a rider currently. Gerardo Corrales, one of the top contenders to gain that mount with this out-the-back closer and upsetter in the Gotham earlier this spring.
It was a dominant win to get him in the field in the Gotham, where he absolutely dominated a field of 14 at over 20-1. But that was a race at one turn. It was over and off track, and he took advantage of a hot early pace. He is a major outsider as Ben Colebrook sends out his first Kentucky Derby starter with Raise Kane.
We're going to take a look at his track work from yesterday. We're going to bring Rosie Napravnik back in. And Rosie, this horse that likes to come from off the pace, but appears to be very eager in the early stages of this work.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on how eager he was. And a lot of times when you have a horse coming off of a one-turn mile race, you worry a little bit about how well they'll rate around 2 turns. But it looks like his running style suggests that he should rate just fine. And once he gets into this work, you know, he is in the bridle, but he's not pulling. He's not really trying to do way too much. And he looks like he's just getting along with his rider there. He's got a target here coming around, turning down the stretch, and he's really in hand, striding out really nicely. Looks to be moving very well over this Churchill track. And then it looks like he's pricking his ears here just back and forth before he comes under the wire. But I would say like a really, really easy, nice maintenance 49.5 for this horse leading up.
When you're a rider, Rosie, and you have a target like that, is the goal to get past that target and maybe show a little bit of competitiveness, or just stay with the target?
I think the target, most of the time the trainers are using the target so that you have something to sort of keep the horse's attention and keep them in the bridle wanting to get past the horse. But the point isn't always to go straight past him, and that would probably depend on the individual horse. If you had a horse that sort of hangs with a horse at the finish and doesn't want to go right by, then you would want to go right by in the work. But if you have a horse that's pretty aggressive and takes you there, you're just looking to sort of end up head and head with a horse. Maybe stick their nose in front just to help with their confidence. But this was a really nice gallop out. You can see they just galloped out right together, and this horse, Raise Kane, wasn't being asked to do anything, so just a nice maintenance half.
Ben Colebrook with his first Kentucky Derby starter, and Raise Kane still looking for a rider on that one. The draw coming up on Monday. Brad Cox has got 4 horses this year. Jaces Road, probably the most likely of those to go forward, Scott. He did earn enough points, as it turned out, with his performance in the Louisiana Derby.
His lone 2-turn win is the win in the Gun Runner, where he went wire to wire in that event back a day after Christmas last time in the Louisiana Derby. Slow early pace. Florent Giroux opted to sit off King's Barnes, ended up resulting in a 3rd-place effort. I would expect Florent maybe to be a little bit more aggressive come next Saturday.
Now, Rosie, tomorrow, Saturday, we're going to have a lot of Kentucky Derby work. So in between the work last weekend, which was the heavy lifting, and the maintenance work tomorrow, you got to keep these horses happy and healthy in their gallops, and there you see Jaces Road.
Yeah, and I mean, when you see horses galloping out here, what you want to see is them in the bridle, but not doing too much. You want your horse to be just right on the day. So you don't want to take too much out of them during their training. You want them to be doing enough. You want them to be getting comfortable with the atmosphere. And Jaces Road seems to be a really straightforward horse galloping on the track in the video here. Not tugging on his rider, just they're getting along well, and he's just kind of going around doing his job, and that's really what they're looking for from these horses this week.
Jaces Road likely to go forward. Verifying for Brad Cox could be a little bit forward in the Kentucky Derby as well. We take a look at this son of Justify, who has always been highly regarded, Scott, but he really proved his class by running second last out to Tapit Trice in the Bluegrass.
Yeah, this son of Justify very well bred, a half-brother to Midnight Bijou, earned nearly $4 million, ran third in the 2018 Kentucky Oaks. I thought was a cut below the top in this crop until last time out in the Bluegrass. He lost to Tapit Trice, who definitely deserved the victory that day, but he ran very well in defeat and appears to be coming into the Derby in the best form of his career.
Got to take a look at Verifying's recent track work, and Fernando Espinoza is the regular rider in the mornings for Verifying. And Rosie, just talk maybe a little bit about Verifying, but also the importance of these exercise riders who are on these horses way more frequently than the actual jockeys.
Yeah, and I was just going to comment on Brad Cox's barn. He typically has such great exercise riders. What I love about this gallop here is that if you look at the rider, his reins are really long. His hands are back by the withers, almost back by the saddle, and he's just set his hands down on the neck, and this horse is just happy to gallop along and do his job, not tugging. I mean, this is just a really harmonious combo here, the rider and the horse. The horse is happy. He's pricking his ears a little bit, not overly interested, overly stimulated, but very attentive. And this is a lovely gallop. This is ideal for any horse.
From Brad Cox to another trainer who has not had a starter, along with Ben Colebrook and a few others in this year's Derby, Larry Ravelli. And we haven't talked much about Two Phils. He is not on the grounds yet. He is still back home at Hawthorne, Scott, and he had the highest brisnet speed figure of any 3-year-old with a 107 last stop in the Jeff Ruby Stakes at Turfway. But that was on synthetics.
That was on synthetic. People might hold that against him, but I think that would be a mistake. He has proven form over the main track, both at one turn and at 2 turns. He has the tactical speed. Don't expect him to be up and on the pace, but he should get first run, should get a really good trip. Looking forward to Two Phils getting here in Louisville, Joe.
Winner of the local street sense here at Churchill, and not many of us are doing a rain dance in advance of the Derby, but Larry Ravelli and Jareth Loveberry might after that huge performance in the slop. And we thank Jim Miller and the Hawthorne TV department for getting this workout to us. Two Phils at Hawthorne yesterday, and Rosie, he has a target. This is a sprinter up in front of him, and Two Phils at Hawthorne going 59, which is a very, very good work over that deep racetrack.
Yeah, I mean, the 59 work is a really, a great work. And this horse, having sprinted earlier on in his career and even showing speed then, and now running 2 turns and showing more of like stalking speed, you would think that this horse is a little bit versatile in the fact of that he could be sort of placed in a variety of positions, which is great, a great aspect to have in a horse in the Derby. But coming around the quarter pole here and heading into the stretch, you can see he easily catches up to the Derby work. And watch the rider just has their elbows out, okay, and is not moving his hands. He's not really asking much there. He kind of goes to just moving on him a little bit, and you can see his body got a little bit lower, knees opened a little bit, and the horse just went on his own accord.
Jareth Loveberry has ridden Two Phils in all but one of his 8 career starts. It'll be his first appearance in the Kentucky Derby, and he did fly into Chicago for that work aboard Two Phils for trainer Larry Ravelli. It's going to wrap it up for segment 1 here on the Kentucky Derby Morning Work Show. We'll be back in just a bit, but first we want to remind everybody watching all over the country and from all over the world, you can ask us questions, give some opinions, let us know what you think, and those people, you got phones, you can join us on Twitter, you can ask us a question as we wave to all of the people here live at Churchill Downs, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Use that hashtag KY Derby. We had a lot of Kentucky Oaks horses work yesterday, including the quartet from the barn of trainer Brad Cox. One of those is Wet Paint. We'll take a look back when we return.
Race to TwinSpires and register with code GET200 to start earning your new player bonus of up to $200. Watch and bet on some of the world's best racing and check out our expert picks and weekly promotions. TwinSpires. Download the app now.
Does your horse have the stomach to compete at this level? Your answer is likely yes, if your horse uses Reline GI. Reline GI is an all-natural supplement made with patented stomach buffering HA that helps support your horse's gastric health. Plus, it's Clean Sport certified, so you know it's safe to use while racing. Learn more about Reline GI, because even a horse with the heart of a champion needs a healthy stomach to race at their peak.
Kentucky Derby, Woodford Reserve Bourbon is a spectacle for the senses.
We are back on the Kentucky Derby morning workout show. The Derby horses are going to put the finishing touches on themselves tomorrow for the most part with their final works 1 week out from the Derby. Yesterday with the showers coming in last night and today, a lot of the trainers kind of called audibles and worked their Oaks fillies on the fast main track Thursday morning. We're going to take a look back at several of those as you see the maintenance going on right now for that designated training time, which will be about 10 minutes from now. Joe Christopher and Scott Shapiro joining you from the studio. Also, Caitlin Free on the backstretch and Rosie Napravnik on the fourth floor. And Scott, we've had a couple of minor changes depending on how you look at it in the Kentucky Derby field over the last week. Kentucky Oaks, for the most part, recently has remained the same.
Yeah, Wonder Wheel was the last horse to move up. That happened before we got started here on the morning work show. The field has remained intact. And there you see the leaderboard with the top 10 down to 61 points with Gambling Girl. Looking forward to hearing a soundbite in a bit from Norm Cassie on South Lawn, who won the Fairgrounds Oaks. Pretty mischievous, right above, finished second in that exact race.
Andrew Brown with a great feature with Brad Cox on TwinSpires Twitter. You want to take a look at that. It's a lot of fun and very insightful. You see Julia Shining, Hoosier Filly, Punch Bowl, some of the more high-profile horses in this crop still on the outside looking in. All right, Brad Cox worked three of his Oaks horses, in company yesterday, and two of them went head-to-head. This is the Alice look on the inside and Wet Paint on the outside. And Rosie, we're going to bring Rosie Napravnik back in here. The Alice look has a little bit more tactical speed. She's on the inside. Wet Paint, a defined deep closer, is on the outside. Take us through what you're seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that even at this point that the Alice look is just a little bit more in the bridle and taking his rider. That rider is sitting back a little bit in his position, his feet are forward as he's just trying to keep her to maintain a pace, whereas you could even see the rider on Wet Paint even used his whip there on the shoulder of Wet Paint on the outside. I don't know if you caught that, but just to keep the filly interested, you can see, just watch the whip on the outside. It'll just come out, and he almost sort of flags her, maybe taps her on the shoulder, but then she gets into her stride here in the stretch, and now they're both going easily together. So this is a really kind of a common work that you might see from Todd's horses, coming head and head, and you can just really see the dynamic of the two different speed scenarios and these horses' running styles in this breeze. They gallop out together here, and it looks like Wet Paint might be just going just a little bit. Now you can see the rider on the Alice look asking a little bit, whereas Wet Paint's jockey is sitting, so a little bit better on the outside with Wet Paint.
The Alice look, probably double-digit odds in the Kentucky Oaks. Wet Paint could be the favorite. She's been on a serious roll of late at Oaklawn Park, and Brad Cox has another horse in Botanical who's spent the winter at Turfway Park, and she's run on nothing but synthetics, and you're going to see her on the outside here of another nice filly in Flashy Gem, who is not going to run in the Oaks, but is talented in her own right. And Rosie, I mentioned it, and this is the big question going into the Kentucky Oaks. A horse that has been tremendous on synthetic racetracks has yet to run in a race on the dirt, but she seems to be handling it just fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a big question and when a horse has not run on the dirt. But, we're going to see in this work, she works in a minute and 3, which is not a bad work on this track. I mean, that's kind of, I'm sure, what the type of work that Brad's looking for with this filly. She's also got a target here. She seems to be getting along really well. You can see her rider is just sitting chilly here, not really pulling, not really pushing. Come around the turn, and all he does is really soften his hands and let this filly move out. She easily catches up to her workmate, and it looks like she could really go right by on the outside here. So I think this is a great work for this filly in regards to how she's handling the track. And like you said, though, big question if she's, the other factor there is dirt in the face. So if she's not on the lead, how's she going to handle the dirt in the face?
There you see Botanical, who will be trying dirt for the first time in a horse race 1 week from today, the Longines Kentucky Oaks. Brad Cox with 4 horses in the Derby, 3 in the Oaks. The heavy lifting for the Oaks horses is now done. We caught up with Brad Cox to find out what he thought.
Good move. Broke off this morning on the outside of the Alley's look. They worked together 5/8 from the 4.5 marker. Had him in a minute and 3/5. Good gallop out into the bridle. Very happy. I thought her move this week was actually a little bit better than last week, so that's encouraging moving forward. And fingers crossed she comes out of it, and both of them come out of it in good order. And hopefully they make a good account of themselves next Friday. A good move, steady for her. Louis Saez has the call on her right now, and he won on her in January at the fairgrounds, so he knows her. He was very happy with the way she was moving, how she went along, and had positive feedback from him, so I think we're all set. Wet paint, if you work her on her own and the Alley's look, if you work them on their own, they can give you a little bit of a flat work, maybe making sure we keep them honest, get a little bit more out of them in regards to their morning workload, not wanting to do too much but do enough. There's that fine line there, and I feel like if we have them in company and they respond well enough, the first part of the work, they'll finish up well together. It has a little bit to do with Flashy Jim as well, not getting her too cranked up early on in the work. We don't want them to go too quick too early and then not finish. So Chris was obviously on the outside with Botanical. My exercise rider Edvin was on the inside with Flashy Jim. They did an outstanding job, and a lot of that has to do with Edvin setting, basically he's on the inside, he's setting the pace. And, obviously Chris is, not right on top of him, pressing him along. So that's all about them two guys working well together and, executing the work as well as they could. I love it. I know there's a question mark with if she likes the dirt, and, that's very fair to think that. But, based off her works, I feel confident she'll handle it. It's just like wet paint last time with a dry dirt at Oaklawn. There was some question whether she would handle the dry dirt, but her works leading up to the Fantasy showed us that she would. And, it doesn't always work out, but I'm feeling confident that we'll get a big effort out of both of them.
Bryson Cox, Brad Cox's son, the jockey agent for Chris Landeros, who has the biggest amount of his life aboard Botanical in the Kentucky Oaks. We wish them the best. All right, from one trainer with a lot of cards to play in Brad Cox to another holding a great hand in both the Oaks and the Derby, Todd Pletcher, and he's got Gambling Girl, Julia Shining. Julia Shining right now on the outside looking in, and also on the outside of this work, Rosie.
Yeah, so again, you're going to have this pair going down to the pole together, and you can see Julia Shining on the outside is really tugging on her rider. You can see the rider's hips are way back, and the hands are kind of going up and down as they have resistance against the bridle there. Gambling Girl on the inside is just a little bit softer in the rider's hands, but and now as they get into the work, you can see that Julia's Shining rider has come up a bit just to get his filly to kind of catch up and meet up at the pole together. So here they're going to work head and head pretty much from the half-mile pole, and it's really hard to say who's even going better at this point, but they're both going well together. I really like the way that Julia Shining is striding out on the outside there. And they come off the rail a little bit there. I think that's probably to try to maintain their speed, not go too fast. If they're trying to stay a little bit on the slower side, they're going to drift out on the track a bit. You'll see a faster work might be closer to the rail, but looks like they're just trying to go in that typical 49.50.
All right, thanks, Rosie. Malathat's baby sister, Julia Shining on the outside, looking in on the outside of this work. Gambling Girl, the New York bred, on the inside. We caught up with trainer Todd Pletcher to see what he thought about his Oaks fillies.
Julia Shining's always been a very classy filly to be around. Having had her full sister and her dam, we had high expectations for her coming in. She's always been a real good mover, and she's one that we've always felt like would improve as she got a little older, and certainly I think will appreciate a little more distance of ground as well. I thought she handled the track well in both of her breezes here. We weren't looking to do much this morning, just sort of an easy half. She was well held against the bridle the whole way, and then we kind of shortened the gallop out a little bit, and I was very happy with her energy and the way she was moving. With Gambling Girl, we haven't changed too much with her routine. She's a very consistent filly. She tries hard every time. I know she'll appreciate the 1 1/8. She's shown up and given us a good effort every time. Kind of would need things to fall just right and get a great trip, but. We're confident she'll show up and give us 110%. Gambling Girl's very straightforward. She's been a pro from the very beginning.
Todd Pletcher speaking on Gambling Girl, who's in, and Julia Shining, who's hoping to get in 1 week from today. The draw again for the Oaks and Derby coming up on Monday as we take a look at the horses about ready to go onto the main track for the designated training hour. 15 minutes, I should say, 7:30 to 7:45. We're going to have lots of action, particularly from the Derby horses when we return on the Work Show presented by TwinSpires. We'll be right back.
Race to TwinSpires and register with code GET200 to start earning your new player bonus of up to $200. Watch and bet on some of the world's best racing and check out our expert picks and weekly promotions. TwinSpires. Download the app now.
Does your horse have the stomach to compete at this level? Your answer is likely yes, if your horse uses Reline GI. Reline needs a healthy stomach to race at their peak.
We are back on the Kentucky Derby Morning Work Show presented by TwinSpires. You see horses about ready to get their morning exercise in during this designated training period. And if you're here in Louisville and you're joining us on social media, what are you doing? Come on out to the racetrack. It is open for morning works to the public. If you're joining us from anywhere in the world, you can participate. You can ask us questions, give us your opinions, join in the conversation. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube by using the hashtag KYDerby. And we're going to answer a question right now, in fact, and try to get to a few more of them during the course of the show. And yes, everybody, Scott Shapiro is waving to you guys from the set. All right, let's take a look at a question. See what we got here. We got John from YouTube asking about the projected early pace horses. And Scott, we talked about the fact that Cyclone Mischief is number 21. He would like to draw in. He would be one of those horses. But unlike last year where we had a ridiculous early pace up front, I don't see that scenario based on who is in the field currently.
Yeah, I kind of have warmed to the fact that I think it'll be a more honest pace than a slow one. And that has a lot to do with, A, Jaces Road drawing in. I think Confidence Game is likely to show speed. Verifying likely to be prominent early. One of the other Brad Cox runners should be sitting. I think Reincarnate also coming back from the Oaklawn races and from California for Tim Yakteen is a horse that's going to be more aggressively ridden. So I'm thinking an honest pace, Joe, but like you said, not like last year.
A lot of horses with similar styles. Practical Move, King's Barnes, Jaces Road,
King's Barnes is one I didn't mention.
Verifying, Reincarnate, like you mentioned, Cyclone Mischief. Those horses want to be forward. We saw several years in a row where horses that were in the first flight were the eventual winners of the Kentucky Derby. We got more social media questions a little bit later on in the program as horses start to move their way onto the racetrack. As you see there, Jaces Road, we're going to open up Rosie Napravnik's mic. We'll get Caitlin Free involved, Scott Shapiro and I from the set. But Rosie is the new voice here, and I want to get as much insight from her as possible today. And Rosie, the trainers, the jockeys, the owners, right now you are 1 week and 1 day away from the Kentucky Derby. Right now at this point, the heavy lifting has been done last weekend, maintenance workouts coming up tomorrow. You just hope that everything goes well through the draw and up to race day.
Yeah, and you're looking for the horses out here that are handling the track, they're handling the atmosphere. Right now on camera we have Disarm, who is doing the typical Steve Asmussen walk over to the front side. I just love to see this. This really gives the horse a chance to just chill and relax. A lot of horses will come on and stand in, and they just sort of stand and watch for a while. You don't see that as much during the Derby training because there's limited time. But I love to see this horse walking over to the front side. We've got a whole slew of horses that are jogging over, that are just about 1/8 of a mile away from the wire here. They did seal the track again, which I think, they were definitely forced to seal the track again, but it squeezed a lot of water out of the track, and I think at the next break they may be able to harrow it. We've got, let me see, I think this is one of the Pletcher.
I think it's King's Barnes, Rosie.
King's Barn is coming up here. This is Forte. I'm trying to pick him out. He's with the pony here. I love this horse. I mean, this horse has got to have almost a 30-foot stride when he's striding out. And this is one of my favorite horses in the Derby. He's here with the pony, looks very happy, confident, and relaxed. We've got the whole Pletcher slew here at the wire. Then they're just going to turn in, and Tappet Trice is starting out first for his gallop. Forte's just going to stand in here with the pony and probably head off behind Tappet Trice. We'll see, how far they take this horse before they let him go. A lot of times they'll just get him turned around, get him headed in the right direction, make sure they're clear of other horses, and then there he goes off away from the pony. Like I said, just a huge horse with a huge stride, Forte, and I really have been excited to see have the chance to see this horse on the track this morning and his final work. We've got one of the Oaks fillies coming by me, but you can still see Forte here. Just relaxed. You can see his rider's hands are down. He looks like a really pleasant horse to gallop, and that's really what you're looking for in these Derby horses, is who looks pleasant, moving well, relaxed, getting along with the rider. He's got his ears pricked here. I love this gallop for a horse, leading up to a breeze. I know a lot of these horses will probably be breezing tomorrow, so this is a great gallop for Forte. Coming down the backside here. Probably just went past Caitlin.
And Scott, favorite for the Kentucky Derby. There's been some talk about what kind of price Forte will be. He certainly hasn't done anything, and Rosie just alluded to it in his morning track work, to take anybody off of him if you were on him to begin with.
Without question, he's a great-looking animal. Was a picture in the Fountain of Youth. Ran a little bit worse, if you will, in the Florida Derby. Did have a little more trouble. Not as good of a trip that day. The question is, like you said, Joe, what price are you willing to swallow in a relatively even 20-horse Kentucky Derby this year, as the 149th edition is nearly upon us? To me, he's going to be too short of a price, but would be far from shocking if he beat me.
The buzz continues to grow on the backstretch day by day by day. I know Caitlin Free is back there. Curious if Caitlin is hearing any buzz, what she thinks about these horses coming on and off as we go from one Pletcher to another. Caitlin and Tappet Trice, and well documented. He kind of needs to get his head in the game. The rider has to, kind of encourage him early on in the race to stick with it. But Tappet Trice, certainly based on his resume, one of the top and major players for the Kentucky Derby. As we go from Forte, I believe we're going to go to Tappet Trice next.
For sure. Tappa Trice definitely one that I have really enjoyed watching over the surface, and definitely not as much today since it is a little bit sloppy, but I had a good chance to get a look at him yesterday. He galloped by me a few different times, and this horse just really seems to float well over the surface. He gets over it very, very nicely. He's kind of a peculiar type of Tapit. He does remind me of some of Tapit's Belmont Stakes winners, but he just seems to be a little more of a free type of mover than some of the other Tapits are, and I've really enjoyed how he's gotten over the surface. As we said, definitely a little bit more sloppy today, but the way he was moving yesterday was very, very pleasing, and I've seen some of the responses on social media, and we're getting several people really wanting us to kind of talk about Tappa Trice a little bit more.
Well, they're getting their wish, and we're going to go to Rosie because this is a horse, Rosie, that's well documented, that needs encouragement almost from the word go and all the way to the finish line to bring out the best in him. I'm sure you've ridden horses like that in the past.
Yeah, absolutely been on those types, and also Gervin was a horse that way, which I experienced a lot more of Gervin's training when Joe had that horse in the Derby. But Tappa Trice galloped past me. He looks great, and those horses sometimes, even though it seems like you've got to work for it every step of the way, and sometimes they're just getting there at the wire, they're showing up every time. And that's a horse that everybody loves to put their money on, is a horse that they know is going to come rolling at the end. And this horse looks like he's having a great gallop out here this morning too. Like he's not a horse that you have to push along in a gallop per se, and looks like he's enjoying, being out here, striding out. He's got his ears pricked here. It looks like he's probably around at the 3/8 pole. Here he comes around the quarter pole. I think I'm at the right pole, but I'm looking at the video. He went by me a little bit ago. And there you can see he is challenging his rider just a little bit, but he's happy. He's got his ears pricked. He's alert and he's taking it all in, but he's not overstimulated. He's not stressed out by any means. Looks to be handling the track well, and really training positively this morning.
Most expensive horse in the field, a $1.3 million yearling, and he certainly looks the part. That is Tappa Trice. From a big ticket sales purchase to a homebred. This is Disarm for trainer Steve Asmussen. And Rosie, you know a thing or two about riding for this barn.
Yeah, I love the way that Steve's horses train. I love the walkover, and Disarm was actually over here standing at the wire for just a minute, I think, waiting for just the track to clear out a little bit, and he was kind of just tossing his head about. He's excited to get out here and do his job. He's a really happy horse. He's got his ears pricked all the time. You can see his tongue hanging out there, which doesn't really mean anything. Sometimes the horses, it can be a little bit of nerves, but he clearly isn't a horse that's super nervy. I mean, he's excited to be out here doing his job. His rider looks like he's, obviously Steve's always got a regular rider for each horse, especially at this level, that gets along with him really well. And Steve is super particular about which rider is on which horse, and rider and horse developing a relationship so that they get along really well so they can do their best training. Which is always going to be in the best interest of the horse. I love the way that Disarm is galloping here. He's just kind of head down doing his business, but you can see he's really, the expression on his face is that he belongs here and he's in a place where he loves to be. So I really love the way that this horse is training this morning.
Kind of like the expression on Scott Shapiro's face. He knows he belongs here, right next to me. All right, Disarm snuck his way in, Scott, into Lexington. Last minute wasn't, part of Steve's plan to get into the Derby that way, but he worked like a monster the other day, and he's kind of climbed back up my list in recent days.
Well, he's going to have to run a career best effort, as most of the horses in this field is, but he's going to have to take a step forward. But, what you're seeing there visually, I've heard a lot of talk about how much he looks like his sire. Gunrunner, who of course, ran third in here, ran on to do bigger and better things, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's true of this colt. Joel Rosario was aboard his second-place effort in the Louisiana Derby that got him into the picture. He'll be aboard again here. Got into the race with that third-place finish in the Grade 3 Lexington. He's got tactical speed, Joe, but I think his best effort is if they go at it early and he comes from off the pace.
Earlier, we talked to Brian Hernandez Jr., or actually Caitlin Free did, and we're going to bring Caitlin back in because we've got some tape of Defining Purpose from earlier, just moments ago, in fact, on the track. And, Caitlin, you talked about that masterful ride that Brian Hernandez put on that day in the Ashland, putting this filly in perfect position. That was a short stretched mile and a 16th. So my concern with her would be the mile and an 8th, but she certainly looks energetic in this gallop.
That was kind of what I talked to Brian about, if he thought she was going to stretch out well and would definitely take that step forward. And he seemed to indicate that he thought she would. I was really impressed and really surprised with her performance in the Ashland. Like you said, he put her in a perfect spot. She did take that necessary step forward. And I think she's kind of flying under the radar here a little bit. We have to remember, although she was in the perfect position in the Ashland, she beat a really good field in there with some really highly regarded fillies. Wonder Wheel, Julia Shining, Punch Bowl, who was at one point a pretty big focal point in the Oaks. So she beat a really good field in there and definitely, has some good credentials coming into this race.
Humberto Zamora, the regular exercise rider aboard King's Barnes. This is him from moments ago. And Rosie, Todd Pletcher has 3 horses for this year's Kentucky Derby. This one is undefeated, but he didn't race at age 2. And he's only had 3 lifetime starts. Now, to me, he looks very professional in the mornings. He's never lost a horse race. He's going to show tactical speed. And at Fairgrounds, a mile and 3/16 of the distance of the Louisiana Derby probably most replicates what he's going to see a week from Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every year there's the one horse that's lightly raced but seems to be coming into their own at the right time. And so there's always that question about experience versus talent. And it all has to, and that's what's so hard about the Derby. It all has to come together at the very perfect time. So, this horse's race last out was very impressive. Obviously, he was very impressive at Tampa. But when they're going a mile and 3/16, and in such a commanding way, shows tactical speed. This is definitely a horse you have to very much consider. Love the way he looked on the track this morning. Again, looks like he's handling the track really well. You can see switch leads there coming around the turn. But yeah, a horse that every year we have one that has a question of just experience. And, in that right, Todd's going to have him as prepared as he possibly can be with only having 3 starts under his belt.
I want to ask you a question, Rosie. You've seen these horses races. You've seen the past performances. When you rode, you watched the tape. You looked at the past performance. You looked at the competition and tried to figure out how you could win the race. If you're riding King's Barnes, I would think you want to be forward. But this horse, although he has speed, he can be a little bit tactical. So I'm just thinking for you would think forward trip and just try to get him in the clear.
I think almost everybody coming out of the starting gate in the Derby is thinking a little bit forward, but just as far as not losing position. So you're going to ride this horse forwardly out of the gate. I don't like to comment too much on the pace scenario until I know who's in which post position and who the riders are on each horse, because that is really what matters a lot in how the pace scenario sets up. But I mean, this horse is definitely going to be ridden forwardly out of the gate and looks to be very capable of having a good position going into the first turn.
We've got Rocket Can now, Rosie, and it's interesting because this horse is going to add blinkers for the Kentucky Derby, much like Sun Thunder, who we talked about earlier with Brian Hernandez. He doesn't wear the blinkers in his morning track work. He did wear them in his gallop, in his breeze the other day, though. Explain maybe the difference between, having the blinkers on for the races, having the blinkers on even for a work, but not having them on for the just normal track work like we see here.
Yeah, I mean, the blinkers is something that you would add typically just for the breezes. I just wanted to mention that he did come out of, this horse, Rocket Can, came out of the paddock and was schooling in the paddock earlier. He's a really relaxed horse. And like you can even see as he's coming right past the wire right now, and he's just absolutely relaxed. And so that is the type of horse where, if you want to sharpen him up a little bit, you'll put the blinkers on. I think going into the Derby is, it's a risky time to make a move like that, but when you have a trainer like Bill Mott, you're going to trust his instincts 100%, and it might be just what he needs to keep him really tactical and paying attention. But he's got, in the morning as he's galloping, you like we've heard so many times, you don't want him to do too much. You want him to do just enough. So they may put it on for the breeze to sharpen him up, and, assuming he'll probably have it on for his breeze here this week as well. but not typically something that you see them gallop in every day unless there's a specific reason that relates to how they train.
Horse that Rocket Can is familiar with from their battles in South Florida. That is Mage. We're going to take a look at him next. And much like Kingsbarn's Rosie, only 3 races in his career. He did not run at 2, but he's shown signs of being a really good horse. He broke slowly, made a huge wide move in the Florida Derby, ran second to Forte. And much like Kingsbarn's, it may be showing a little bit more energy, but he seems to be very relaxed as well.
Yeah, I mean, this horse is not one of my favorite coming out of the Florida Derby, but he certainly ran a respectable race. And here, coming down, I think this is down the backside on this video here. He's just, you can see he's got his head up a little bit, and just isn't quite as relaxed as some of the other horses, like Rocket Can, who just came past. But, you know, he's not going too quick by any means, and a horse that's definitely going to have run at the end.
Does it, I mean, he just got here a couple days ago. It takes a little while to get acclimated. He seemed very relaxed the last couple days, maybe showing a little bit more eagerness to do more today. Do horses just kind of get a little bit restless and say, hey, man, I'm ready to do more at this point?
Yeah, I mean, you would expect when they come and they're first here seeing all of the things that are going on around the track. You know, you've got the crowd out here on the apron, which is not typical for morning training, you know, and they may suspect that there's a little bit more excitement going on than a normal day's training. So it's not uncommon to move to a different track and have the horse be a little bit more aggressive than they normally are. But this horse isn't being overly aggressive. And now that he's, you know, turned down the front side here, he looks to have just settled into his stride. His rider's hands are back. He's not tugging on him. You know, it could have just been, and even with these, with the horses passing him on the inside there, he just takes a little tug of his rider. He's coming past me, and we're a little bit on a different feed than the video here, but just got a little aggressive as 2 horses breezed by him. But, you know, this rider clearly knows the horse well and gets him right back. Just, you know, maybe a little bit more aggressive in his first couple days at the track.
All right, thanks, Rosie. Again, we've got fans here at Churchill Downs and watching from all over the country and the world, and we've got some social media questions coming in. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible, and we do have 3 Japanese horses on the grounds. 2 of them are in the Derby field at this point, but no European horses. We're going to send this question over to Caitlin Free, our European expert here on the panel. And Caitlin, here's the question. Why aren't there any European horses in the Kentucky Derby? We thank Sonia from Facebook for that question.
Excellent question, Sonia. Really, the European horses can enter the Derby. There is a European road to the Kentucky Derby for them to earn points in the same way as the Japanese road to the Kentucky Derby. The European horse that does get the most points leading up to the Kentucky Derby, they do get an automatic invitation. So if the European horse that does have the most points did elect to come, there would only be 18 spots open for the domestic qualifiers. So like the Japanese, they can qualify, they can get that invitation. But a lot of the European horses will go by way of the UAE Derby. Mendelssohn did it a few years ago, and there was actually a horse really similar to Mendelssohn, Cairo, that attempted to do it this year. He was actually favored in the UAE Derby, but was beaten by Dermo Sotogake. Continuar also finished ahead of him, but he was attempting to try to come here and do the same thing Mendelssohn did. He won the same European road to the Kentucky Derby races that Mendelssohn did, but ultimately did not make the trip for trainer Aidan O'Brien. But it has been done, and they've run well in the past. I believe in the 80s there was a horse from Great Britain that ran second in the Derby. I think he was second to Ferdinand, so can be done, and they often do show up here once every few years.
I should have known better than to ask Caitlin a question about a European horse in the Derby. We have to freaking cut her off there because she could have gone on.
Not a chapter, a book.
Unlike Caitlin, I had to research the answer. She knew all that off the top of her head. But there are 7 races in the European road to the Derby. They're worth points. There's also the potential for that auto invite like Continuar got. But Japanese racing is mostly turf, but they've been a little bit more prominent on the dirt recently, you know, where in Europe it's almost all turf racing with a little bit of synthetics.
Yeah, an exception would be horses coming over from Europe. We saw Mendelssohn, who won the UAE Derby, much like Dermo Sotogake, come over and try the dirt. Didn't particularly like the off-track, but showed later on in his career that he did belong coming into the Derby.
We got a lot of questions coming in this morning. Keep them coming in, guys. We do appreciate it. Kelly from Facebook wants to know from Scott Shapiro, what do you think about Skinner? Now, Skinner hasn't arrived here at Churchill Downs yet. We haven't had a chance to really talk talk about him because he wasn't into the race until yesterday, hasn't gotten here yet. We'll talk more about him next week, but just give your initial thoughts on Skinner.
Well, he's pace dependent. He doesn't have a lot of speed at all. Like many John Sheriff's runners, we saw Giacomo come from off the pace. A lot of you might think of Zenyatta, obviously a late runner. He's fast enough to be. He deserves to be in this field. And if he gets it on his pace and is able to save ground in our new rider, Juan Hernandez, he is not without a shot to not only hit the board here, but I think he's got enough talent if for whatever reason it's a hotter pace than we expect to run this field down.
Got a question for Rosie Napravnik from one of our people joining in from social media, Ashley from Facebook, actually. And I'm looking forward to how you answer this question, Rosie. What is the process for choosing a jockey for the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I would say, ideally you would have a rider that has been riding the horse in the Derby prep races, a rider that knows the horse really well leading up to the Derby, and you would hope that that would be your rider. But in many cases, a lot of these riders are riding multiple horses in the prep races, and they obviously can only enter one horse, they can obviously only ride one horse into the starting gate on Derby day. So you may have a rider who's ridden the horse in the past. You may, often there are riders that just have certain relationships with trainers where they know, the style of how a trainer prefers a jockey to ride. There are some trainers who really prefer you to be forwardly placed. There are some trainers who really like you to let the horse fall away. So you'll definitely have trainer-rider rapport, and that goes into the their choices. And then there are some cases where you have a horse that no jockey that has ridden him is available to ride him in the Derby, and in which case you might go to a jockey that has a certain style that fits that horse. You may go to a jockey that has just ridden the Derby on quite a few occasions and is experienced with that 20-horse field. So there are lots of different scenarios. I would say the most ideal is to have a jockey that's familiar with the horse and has been riding him in the prep races leading up. But anything can happen. Horses can scratch out of the Derby. Horses can get in late, and then you're looking for a rider that may not be available. There can be a million different scenarios there.
Pride myself on being a good point guard. I knew you would be the best to answer that question, Rosie. Thank you. We are wrapping up the show here momentarily. We've got some excellent offers coming in from TwinSpires. As always, again, it is fast, safe, easy to use, and the official betting partner of Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby. Great promo, Scott. One of them, the money back off.
Yeah, one of the more popular promos from TwinSpires, and it's all Derby week, Joe. We got money back, not just a bet back. Money back means the money will be back in your account, credited shortly after the race. If your horse runs second or third off your win bet, you get up to $10 back. Of course, as always with the TwinSpires promotions, you've got to remember to opt in on the app or on the website.
If you don't have a wagering account, no better time to get one. If you do, make sure you take advantage of these great offers, Scott. And this one in particular, you and I are interested in because we're involved, and it happens tomorrow, opening night at Churchill Downs. Looking so forward to that, getting the meet kicked off. And if you pride yourself as a good horse player, a good handicapper, you might be able to share in $5,000 if you do better than we do.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but people take some shots at us when we have some cold days.
I got no trolls. No trolls on
1 for 10, but this is your chance to take us on. You beat one of us, you win a share of $2,500. You beat both of us, you win a share of $5,000. 1 point earned per winning wager. Players that opt in and make as many winning wagers as both tipsters will win a share of the $2,500, like I said. Or if you beat us both, you win a share of that $5,000, Joe.
We got to see a lot of Kentucky Derby horses on the track today. It is the calm before the storm with the final workouts. Tomorrow promises to be a really, really nice day. Opening night at Churchill Downs is tomorrow as well. And we're going to go around the horn here, Scott. What was your main takeaway from today?
Well, I got to sit back and listen to two-time winning rider in the Kentucky Oaks, Rosie Napravnik, talk a lot about Oaks horses, talk some about Kentucky Derby horses, took some notes. So that was it was good to have Rosie back. Of course, always good to have you and Caitlin, but adding Rosie to the team, really appreciated her insight.
Yeah, Brandon Staub will be joining us this weekend. Looking forward to his insight as well as we send it over to Caitlin Free for her final thoughts. She's on the backstretch, probably hearing a lot more than we do at this point with just me, Scott, and Ryan up here in the studio area. Caitlin?
Definitely plenty of chatter out here today, listening to kind of different things. I had a chance to talk to Mage's connections, always talk to the Japanese connections as well. They've all become my friends back here because they all seem to come through the Lucas Gap here. Also had a chance to talk to Dwayne Lucas this morning. That's always special. It's not Derby week until the coach gets here, so really enjoyed that, enjoyed the playbacks of these works. But I don't know about you guys, I'm a little excited to sleep in tomorrow. I'm going to be off of the morning work show tomorrow, getting ready for opening night. So Rosie, you're going to be back tomorrow, and I hope you enjoyed the show. What are some of your final thoughts wrapping up here?
Yeah, it was great to see, recap on some of yesterday's works for the Oaks. And I think wet paint for me is the standout from the Oaks works, the Oaks fillies working, but super excited to be out tomorrow. And my favorite spot is down right next to the horses and watching them come on the gap, that sort of thing. So I'm excited to see a few particular horses out tomorrow morning. I can't wait to see Forte. I'm really looking forward to seeing Skinner. I also saw Hit Show this morning, who we didn't see on camera, but Hit Show looked phenomenal training this morning. So I'm looking forward to seeing Hit Show train. I do like Skinner. I'm like a little bit curious about this horse. So a couple that I'm hoping to highlight tomorrow and looking forward to seeing them down close to the racetrack.
All right. Thanks, Caitlin. Thanks, Rosie. My final takeaway, Scott, Tappa Trice, he just continues to impress me with his track work in the morning, and he was a $1.3 million purchase. Tappa, the sire, hasn't won the Derby yet, but I think this is his best shot. He seems to have the mental game coming around at the right time, and the physicals are certainly there.
I'm not worried about the Tappet stuff. Essential Quality was very close to winning it with a wide voyage. Tacitus made a big run. That stuff doesn't bother me. He took a significant step forward from a mental perspective in the Bluegrass. I think he's got as good a chance as anyone at this point.
All right, great show. It absolutely flew by today. We thank Rosie Napravnik, Caitlin Free. We get Brandon Staubel in the saddle tomorrow. Fasten your seatbelts, everybody. Get your popcorn ready. Derby workers tomorrow. You don't want to miss that show. Enjoy the remainder of your Friday, everybody.